It isn't hard to love a town for its greater and its lesser towers, its pleasant parks or its flashing ballet, or for its broad and bending boulevards where the continuous headlights follow one dark driver after the next, one swift car after another, all night, and all night. But you can never truly love it till you love its alleys too, where the bright and morning faces of old familiar friends now wear the anxious midnight eyes of strangers a long way from home. A midnight bounded by the bright carnival of the boulevards and the bright girders of the L, where once the marshland came to flower, where once the deer came down the river.
Irving Park, one of the 77 neighborhoods many Chicagoans call home. Its development began in the early 1840s when Major Noble bought a 160-acre plot of land and built a farm with today's boundaries being Montrose Avenue to the north, Irving Park Road to the south, Pulaski Road to the east, and Costner Avenue to the west. Old Irving Park's boundaries still go to Montrose and Pulaski, but extend further south to Addison and west to the Milwaukee Road Railway. Noble did well for himself on his farm, but after some time he decided to retire to McHenry County. He then sold his farm to 4 New Yorkers, Charles T. Race, John S. Brown, Adelbert S. Brown, and John Wheeler, who intended to keep farming, but they saw how well suburban communities were doing elsewhere, so they thought, hey, let's divide this land up and turn it into our own little settlement. We're 7 miles from the city, people will love it. But how are we going to get people out here? One of the men may have thought. So they got in touch with the Northwestern Railroad, who told them, yeah, we'll stop there if you guys build a station. So the men built a station, which is still in operation today. It's the Grayland Station stop on the Metro, located in Milwaukee just north of Schurz High School. The 4 men were feeling pretty good about themselves, but after some time, one of the men may have thought, if people are going to be coming here, they're going to be wondering where it is they're actually going. We're going to need a name to call this place. All the men were scholarly fellows with a deep appreciation for literature. They grew up reading stories like Rip Van Winkle and The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, and may have even thought that this little neck of the woods resembled Sleepy Hollow. So they settled on Irvington after the acclaimed American writer Washington Irving. However, much to their chagrin, there had already been an Irvington, Illinois. So it's back to the drawing board. How about Irving Park? That has a nice ring to it, wouldn't you say, Adelbert? One of the men may have asked. By Scott, that's it, Wheeler, Adelbert may have responded. So it was settled. The men built their station for their little settlement 7 miles away from the city and called it Irving Park. With all the money they made from dividing up the land, they built mansions along Irving Park Boulevard between 1870 and 1874 and watched from the cupolas as the Great Chicago Fire ravaged the city 7 miles away. Sure is a good thing we're up here and not down there, isn't it, Wheeler? Adelbert may have asked. 'Tis, responded Wheeler. I'm gonna get some shut-eye. See you at Bible reading? They needed a place to worship, so they built themselves a church in 1872, the Dutch Reformed Church, which still stands today at the southeast corner of Keeler and Belle Plaine. Well, about a decade later, many of the new residents were growing tired of this newfound suburban living. They yearned for the many amenities that came with city living. So they called up the folks down at City Hall and said, hey, Chicago, we're awfully thirsty out here, and we sure like it if we get some help putting out some of our fires. Oh, and the train is kind of bumpy sometimes too. So Chicago put Irving Park on its big shoulders and said, all right, kid, we'll get you some water piped out to you from Lake Michigan, and we'll give you some fire departments. And we'll even send some streetcars out your way. But you know what this means, don't you? And that they did. In 1889, the residents of the young community got together and decided they were going to annex the neighborhood to Chicago. Something like 200 homes were built in the original neighborhood, but it didn't take long for those boundaries to expand. Grayland, named for Cook County's first Republican sheriff, John Gray, was established in 1874 and extends from Pulaski to Cicero between Irving and Addison. Gray's first house, built in 1856, still stands today and is the oldest home in Irving Park. The boundaries of Irving Park today are from the river to the east, Montrose to the north, Addison to the south up until Pulaski, where it widens out to Leland to the north, Belmont to the south, and west to Milwaukee. It's a pretty diverse neighborhood comprised of large populations of middle-class Latino, Asian, and white residents. Staying west of Pulaski, you'll find the Irving Park YMCA, located on Irving between Kildare and Tripp. Established in 1925, the Y has quite a unique history. In the 60s and 70s, the Bears called it their home for weightlifting and conditioning. Go inside, and you'll see pictures of Ditka and Gil Sayers. If you're a young man, down, and short on some dough, there's no need to be unhappy. There's a place you can go, because it also has 212 single occupancy rooms available. Named for a 19th century American politician, Carl Schurz High School stands at the corner of Addison and Milwaukee. It first opened its doors in 1910 to a group of just over 1,000 students. It expanded so rapidly that in 1915, the Addison wing was completed, and by 1925, the auditorium and triangle had been built, bringing Schurz to its current size. The murals inside Schurz were painted by students under the leadership of Gustav Brandt, a German muralist who painted the likes of the Boston Library and the Auditorium Theater downtown. On the corner of Pulaski and Irving, an ice cream parlor called the Buffalo used to offer America's favorite dessert to residents of the neighborhood and the city alike. Little Catholic school children who had given up the sweet for Lent would show up in droves come Easter to relish in the long-missed treat. Established in 1902 on the corner of Division and Sedgwick, it moved to Irving Park in 1918. It served its specialty to generations of families until 1973, when the land had been sold to build a Shell gas station in its place. Fans of the Buffalo were amiss. They picketed and sent letters to the editor until the city council decided to hold a hearing on the matter. Royko even wrote a column about it. Finally, 3 days before the closing date, the alderman granted a reprieve, a temporary 6-month lease. Later that year, the first Arab oil embargo was in effect. No need for a gas station anymore. The Buffalo got a new 5-year lease. But after that lease ended, the inevitable happened. The land was sold, and a new Shell gas station was built in Buffalo's place. It still stands there today. The Commodore Theater was built for the Gumbiner Brothers circuit in 1921. It stood in Irving Park in Albany. This 966-seat theater served as a popular neighborhood movie house until closing in 1981. It reopened for a while as the Cine Olympia. Folks have said that they would stop at the Buffalo for an ice cream and then go catch a flick at the Commodore right afterward. It fell into disrepair, and shortly thereafter, hooligans used it for illegal activities. For years, residents in the neighborhood appealed to the city to have the dangerous former movie house razed, but it wasn't until late 1990 that the Commodore Theater was finally demolished and afterward, a strip mall built on the site. The oldest movie house in the city, Portage Theater, is located nearby at the Six Corners, but is on the other side of Milwaukee, and so is technically in the Portage Park neighborhood. After 1900, Irving Park started developing pretty quickly. Residential construction boomed, and industries soon located along the north branch of the Chicago River. Among these was a brick manufacturer, which excavated its riverside property for brick-making clay. Some years later, the company abandoned the site and the clay pits became a garbage dump. Because community organizations opposed this new use, the property was eventually downzoned from its industrial designation. In the spring of 1946, the Chicago Park District began acquiring the nearly 55-acre site as a part of a 10-year citywide plan to increase recreational opportunities throughout the city. In 1949, the Park District began demolishing the brick kilns and industrial structures. By the early 1950s, the park had a large tobogganing hill, tennis courts, a playground, and a comfort station. A large open meadow bordered with trees stretched across the southern section of the park. A field house was added in 1956. Located between Irving and Montrose and from California to the river, Horner is one of the largest parks in the city at close to 60 acres. It also has the city's largest dog park, so if you have a doggo, definitely treat it to this gem of a park. Although it's currently under construction, so come later. The park honors Henry Horner, Illinois' first Jewish governor who served from 1933 to 1940. A native Chicagoan, Horner was appointed attorney for the Cook County Board of Assessors in 1907 and was elected judge of the Cook County Probate Court 7 years later. Having gained an early solid reputation for integrity, he won increasing popularity with diverse segments of the community. This broad-based support propelled Horner to the governorship and fostered acceptance of a state sales tax to fund much-needed welfare programs during the Depression. A red granite monument in the northwest corner of the Horner Park depicts the former governor's accomplishments. At one point in time, Sears was the largest retailer in the United States. It started as a mail-order catalog company that had a mostly rural demographic, focusing on folks that couldn't afford to travel to larger cities to buy everything from appliances to clothes. It opened its $1 million Irving Park location in 1938 to a crowd of almost 100,000 people as the first of its gigantic solid-walled stores. It featured the largest display window in the city at the time. Instead of relying on windows for lighting and air circulation, it incorporated artificial lighting and air conditioning into its design concept. Sears reached its zenith in the early 70s. Around the same time the Sears Tower, yes, the Sears Tower, was completed. Shortly after that, other department stores like Home Depot, Kmart, and Walmart started to gain traction throughout the country. In the 1990s, Sears got into some hot water for pricing scandals. California sued the company in 1992 for falsely finding things wrong with cars in their repair centers. This led to the quick demise of the once gargantuan retailer. In 2004, Kmart acquired Sears, and by 2018 it filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy, which effectively closed their last location in Chicago, the Irving Park location, along with thousands of other locations throughout the country. The building still stands there today with speculation that it would be turned into a retail arcade in the lower levels and homes on the upper. However, because of the pandemic and political infighting in the ward, no one quite knows what lay ahead for the building. Some say demolition.